20th century, it was enough for an educated person to be able to read, to be able to write, to be able to do arithmetic. In the 21st century, I think it's now also important to be able to manage your own mind, right? To be able to manage your emotional reactions, to be able to transform pain into something positive and growth-oriented. The liberal arts are not just studying literature and history, but maybe the liberal arts of the 21st century is studying your own mind and helping other people do that as well. I was 20 years old. I was a sophomore at a small liberal arts college in Ohio. I, on a lark, went to the student health fair, and I found that my blood pressure was a little bit high. It was unusual for being 20 years old, so they said, you should go have this checked out. And I found 6 weeks later that I was diagnosed with what was thought to be a terminal and incurable autoimmune disease attacking my kidneys. So the prognosis was 90% chance of mortality within 5 years. And I can remember the day being at the hospital, noticing there was part of my mind that said, okay, 90% is good news. Because it's not 100%, and that somebody's got to be in that 10% that lives, and I decided that that was going to be me. One of my professors gave me a book called The Three Pillars of Zen by Philip Kapleau, which was one of the first English books to teach Westerners how to do Zen. In rural Ohio, there weren't many enlightened Zen masters, so that book was very important to me, and I read it and did what it said and did these practices basically every day, and I ended up living another 17 years after that. In Japan, Zen was the warrior's practice, and that it helped them to face their mortality with clarity. And I thought that would be a really useful thing to know how to do. It basically gave me tools to train my mind. All meditation practices emphasize cultivating attention, which helps you be present. To not get lost in future fantasies about mortality. The interesting thing with kidney disease is that it can stabilize and then suddenly destabilize, and you don't know when it's going to happen. And so it's like, okay, you wake up with the question in your head, is today going to be the day? Is today going to be the day? And if that's the question you have in your head all the time, and you don't have any other tools to deal with it, those practices gave me tools to deal with it. It was a advanced doctoral education in dealing with uncertainty. One thing I learned on this journey of living with disease and really facing mortality is that pain is a fuel that can be transformed, and that it is, in a way, it's a kind of gift, and that if you know how to transform it, it turns into a kind of positive life force or a positive energy. And that these methods of working with your internal experience are the tools to transform pain. Right? Because if we don't transform the pain inside us, then we have this tendency, I think, as human beings to project it out onto the environment, and that so other people have to deal with it. And usually that doesn't make for a very pleasant or pretty life. By undertaking this kind of warrior's journey of grappling with and transforming your own pain opens up possibility in your life that you have no idea is possible from the outset. I was deeply inspired by a quote I found from Peter Drucker that said, you cannot manage other people unless you manage yourself first, which seems like such an obvious thing. And yet, where do we learn how to manage ourselves? Where do you learn how to manage all the stuff in your head? Where do you learn how to manage to focus your attention? How do you manage your emotional reaction? How do you manage your biases that may be clouding your perceptions that affect your results? We don't learn that in any kind of systematic way. My life is a fusion of the West and the East, because both have amazing insights about humanity, except they've been fragmented between an ocean, by an ocean, and now is the time that they need to come together. The starting point of education in many Asian cultures is simply learning how to become present. Attention is the energy you have to invest in your life. Where you put your attention is what your life is. As a culture, we've never been trained really to manage it, to understand that's what your life is, first of all, right? And that the choices you make about how you invest attention is what ends up being your existence. You know? If you're not using attention in a conscious way, you're really kind of giving your life over to maybe a set of habits or expectations that you don't necessarily really believe in or endorse, right? This wave of expectation kind of hits us, and how do we manage all the things we feel like we have to do? Why do people feel like they're being pulled in so many directions at once? Is because they know, okay, I need to focus on this thing to make it work, but at the same time, this is ringing over there, he's calling me over there, she wants something, right? And people feel this tear or this torque. And now that we have a decade of smartphones and technology that follows us everywhere, now people start to understand, oh, okay, I really feel distracted all the time or scattered all the time. And they don't realize it's because their attention is scattered all the time. Attention is the energy we have to invest, our time of life. For me, a relationship is fundamentally about an exchange of attention. If you aren't present in that exchange of attention, then there's no relationship. A tool like mindfulness does is help you really understand how does fear work inside you, so that it gives you a tool to really examine the fear and in some ways dissolve it or metabolize it so that the energy of fear isn't running you. I find that the most successful people, the people who do everything well, do that because they're very clear and almost ruthless about their boundary, about what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. And that they're very clear about that with the people that they work with and for. I have a client who's a lawyer who's also a very devout Jewish man. And he says, I tell my clients when we start an engagement, I'm with you 24/6. And I thought, what a great line, right? And what a great line, and what a great way to set an expectation. So I'm with you 24/6 because I need one day to recharge, and so I'm not available that day. And I want you to know that. For how many of us is it true that at 5 o'clock you go home and you don't think about work, that you spend your weekend dedicated to leisure? Relaxing is a kind of forbidden fruit, and that you can't turn it off. If the 9 to 5 work day and the leisure-filled weekend and the Sunday morning you go to church, those things are less and less part of our lives, for good or for ill now. If those external structures aren't there, then it's now time to start creating the internal structure. Like, how do you manage your own mind in a world that is constantly wanting to distract it? That's a big part of why I do what I do. One day, a friend of mine who was a physician, we were chatting on the phone, and he starts reading off a list of the symptoms of uremic poisoning, which are the signs that your kidney's failing. And as he's going down the list, I'm like checking off every one of those things. And I realize, the time is up. Right? It's kind of played my hand. I turned 5 years into 17, and okay, not too bad. And so I had a heart-to-heart with my physician, and he said, we got 3 options. You could go on a list and wait till some poor soul has an accident and donates their organ to you. In a city like Los Angeles, that wait could be as long as 8 years. And in the United States, dialysis patients have a mortality rate of 20% a year, which is awful. So 20% a year mortality rate, wait 8 years, the numbers don't really look that great. And then he said, well, then there's the third option, which is what's called living donor. And it means you have to ask somebody in your life, would they be willing to donate a kidney? I don't know about you, but most men I know won't even ask for directions, let alone ask for an organ. So that made me have to really dig deep inside myself to tell people I was sick, which most people didn't know, and then ask. And asking for an organ is like putting it's a kind of referendum on your life, basically. It's like you're going to put on a birthday party and you don't know if anybody's going to show up. At the beginning of 2008, I sent out a note to all the people in my life, and faith community I belong to, and my family, and then of course all my students. And so you wait and wait, and I hope you never have to experience this, but a lot of what an organ transplant is waiting. By May, I get a phone call from the donor coordinator at the hospital saying, you know, I'm calling you to let you know that we're going to tell your volunteers, your donor volunteers, to stop calling, or we're going to be sending them away, is what she said. We're going to be sending them away. I said, well, you know, I was sitting in the parking lot outside the dialysis lab, actually, and I thought, what are you talking about? And she said, well, you know, all these people, they've overwhelmed our system, and we can't process the other patients' donors. So we're going to be sending yours away now. And I'm like, well, how many of them are there? And she says, near as we can tell, about 24. So it turns out about 13 of the 24 were my former students, and including my donor. And they said that it's easier to give than to receive, and that is absolutely true. I still have not yet quite come to terms with the fact somebody is willing to give me their organ. I have happily received the kidney of an Amazon warrior, and you know, she rebuilds cars and races motorcycles, and I think she ran a marathon like a month after the surgery or something like that. In very short order, you know, life was totally different, and in the intervening years, I got married, which I had never thought about being able to do, and last year we had a little boy who's turned out to be quite a wonderful little human being, and who charms the socks off of everyone we meet. It's been quite a journey, yeah. And then, of course, suddenly the world is interested in what I have to say, and I get to travel around all over the world, including places like Oslo, to talk about it. Yeah, it's spectacular.